The courtroom smelled like burnt copper and cold stone, and every alien in it was looking at her like she was already dead. Nora Beckett kept her hands folded on the metal table in front of her. She had been sitting in this chair for 3 hours while the Dravani prosecutors argued in their deep, clicking language about what to do with a human cargo pilot who had accidentally crossed into restricted space. She did not understand most of it. Her translator, a thin and nervous Palini named Dullo, kept whispering rough summaries into her ear. Most of them ended with the word bad. The Grand Hall of the Dravani High Court was enormous. It had been carved from a single block of dark mineral on the capital station Ordon, and the ceiling rose so high above that Nora could not see where it ended. Rows of Dravani officials sat in tiered galleries on either side, their scaled faces lit by floating orbs of pale blue light. They were tall beings, nearly 8 feet, with wide flat heads and 4 arms folded across their chests. They watched her the way scientists watch bacteria under glass. The High Arbiter, a Dravani named Solon, sat at the highest point of the chamber on a throne made of the same dark stone. His voice was deep and slow when he finally spoke. Dullo translated in a shaking whisper. The human Nora Beckett is found guilty of unauthorized entry into sovereign Dravani territory. The sentence is permanent exile on Gath 9. The courtroom reacted, not with shock, but with quiet satisfaction. Nora saw it in the way they leaned back, in the way some of them exhaled. This was what they had wanted. A clean ending. No execution to explain. No political mess. Just a woman dropped on a planet that would kill her within days. Dullo grabbed her arm. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. Gath 9 is a Category X death world. No species has survived more than 11 days on the surface. This is a death sentence without the name. Nora looked at him. "What is the weather like there?" Dullo blinked all 4 of his small eyes. "What?" "The weather. On Gath 9. Is it hot? Cold? Rainy?" He stared at her as if she had lost her mind. "It has extreme temperature swings, volcanic activity, hurricane-level storms, toxic plant life, predatory megafauna. The atmosphere is breathable but harsh. Why are you asking this?" "Just want to know what to pack." Nora said. .2 guards came for her. They were Dravani soldiers in black-plated armor, each one towering over her by more than 2 feet. They led her down a long corridor that curved through the interior of the station toward a launch bay where a single drop pod waited. It was small and ugly, shaped like a metal egg with scorch marks on its belly. Inside, there was a thin seat, a basic survival kit, and a cracked datapad loaded with planetary data. Nora climbed in without resisting. One of the guards paused at the door. He looked at her with something that might have been curiosity or might have been pity. "You are very calm for someone who is about to die," he said. "I've been told that before," Nora said. The door sealed. The pod launched. The force of it pressed her into the seat, and she felt the station fall away behind her as the pod entered the drop trajectory toward Gath 9. Through a small, scratched window, she could see the planet growing larger. It was dark red and brown, streaked with orange lines of active lava flows and swirling white-gray storm systems. It looked angry. It looked alive. She pulled the cracked datapad from its slot and began reading. Surface gravity slightly higher than Earth. Atmosphere breathable but with elevated sulfur compounds. Average daytime temperature around 45 degrees Celsius in the equatorial zone, dropping to near freezing at night. Native fauna included several apex predators exceeding 300 kilograms. Plant life was largely toxic to most galactic species. Seismic activity was constant. Storm season lasted 8 months out of the local 12-month cycle. Nora scrolled through the data quietly for a long time. Then she let out a small laugh and shook her head. "Sounds like Australia with extra steps," she muttered. The pod hit atmosphere, and the cabin began to shake. Heat crawled along the outer hull, and the window turned orange with friction fire. Nora gripped the armrests and rode out. She had survived rough landings before. She had grown up in northern Queensland where the spiders could kill you, and the weather tried every summer. She had worked cargo runs through 3 different unstable systems before the Dravani caught her. She was not fragile. The pod punched through a cloud layer, and suddenly the surface was right there, rushing up fast. Dense jungle, dark red and black, spread in every direction. Mountains smoked in the distance. A river or something that was not quite water cut through the trees below, glowing faintly green. Impact. The pod buried itself halfway into soft volcanic soil at the edge of a clearing. Nora hung in her harness for a moment, ears ringing, then unclipped and pushed the door open. The air hit her like a wall. Hot, thick, smelling of sulfur and something sweet underneath like rotting fruit. Insects the size of her thumb buzzed past in swarms. The jungle around her clicked and hummed with hidden life. The sky above was a bruised shade of orange, and somewhere far away, something roared. Nora stepped out onto the soil of Gath 9. She took a deep breath. She coughed once, then steadied herself. Then she opened the survival kit, pulled out the basic tools, and began setting up camp. Somewhere in orbit, Dravani satellites recorded every second. They were waiting for her to die. They would be waiting for a very long time. 3 weeks after the drop pod buried itself in volcanic soil, a junior Dravani analyst named Fenwick sat at his monitoring station on Oridon and stared at his screen with his mouth slightly open. He had been assigned the task that nobody wanted. Write the death report for the human exile on Gath 9. It was supposed to be simple. Check the satellite feeds, confirm biological termination, fill in the date, submit the file. Every previous exile to a Category X world had died within 2 weeks. Most died within 4 days. The longest survivor, a Gorvani smuggler with military-grade implants, had lasted 11 days before the fauna got him. Fenwick pulled up the live satellite feed of the exile zone and leaned forward. The human was alive. Not just alive. She was cooking something. She had built a shelter. It was not elegant, but it was solid. Volcanic rock stacked into low walls. Native timber cut and lashed together for a roof frame. Broad waxy leaves layered on top for rain cover. Beside it, she had dug a shallow pit lined with stones where a small fire burned steadily, fed by dried which she had collected and stacked in neat rows against the shelter wall. Fenwick zoomed in. The woman was sitting cross-legged beside the fire, turning something on a flat stone over the heat. It looked like one of the thick root vegetables native to the equatorial region. His database flagged it immediately as toxic to every known galactic species. He felt a brief spike of relief. She would poison herself, and the report would write itself. But then he watched more carefully. She had a crude setup beside her. 3 separate containers made from hollowed bark, each filled with water at different stages of boiling. She was moving the sliced roots from one container to the next, boiling them repeatedly before transferring them to the cooking stone. She was leaching the toxins out. Fenwick blinked. He ran a chemical analysis on the process and found that with 3 cycles of boiling in clean water, the toxic alkaloids in the root would reduce to levels that a human digestive system could handle. Not comfortably, but survivably. She had figured this out in 3 weeks. On an alien planet, with no laboratory equipment, he expanded the surveillance view. The area around her camp was more organized than he expected. She had cleared brush in a wide circle, creating open sight lines in every direction. A narrow trench had been dug around the perimeter, filled with sharp volcanic stones and what appeared to be thorny branches from a local shrub. Beyond the trench, she had placed markers made of stacked rocks along several paths leading away from camp. Trail markers. She had been exploring. His screen flagged movement in the eastern jungle. A large heat signature. He recognized it immediately from the Planetary Fauna Index. A Gath stalker. 6 legs, heavy muscle, jaws that could crack stone. The apex predator of the equatorial region. It weighed over 400 kilograms and had no natural enemies that IT was moving toward her camp. Fenwick sat up straight. This was it. This was how it would end. He felt a strange knot in his stomach that he did not want to examine too closely. The creature emerged from the tree line about 80 meters from the camp. It was enormous, dark-skinned, moving with the slow, deliberate gait of an animal that had never needed to hurry. Its 6 legs moved in a rolling wave pattern, and its wide, flat head swung side to side, tasting the air. The human looked up from her cooking. She watched it calmly. She did not run. The creature stopped at the edge of her cleared perimeter. It lowered its head and sniffed at the trench line. Then it lifted its head and stared directly at her. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then the creature turned and walked along the perimeter in a wide arc, staying outside the cleared zone. It circled the camp once, paused, let out a low, rumbling growl, and then continued into the jungle on the western side and disappeared. The human watched it go. Then she looked down at her datapad and appeared to mark something on a map. She went back to cooking. Fenwick sat in silence for a very long time. He pulled up his report template. The cursor blinked in the field marked date of confirmed death. He stared at it, then closed the file without typing anything that he called his supervisor. Commander Helene was a tall, sharp-featured Dravani woman who had overseen Exile monitoring for 12 years. She answered with the impatient tone of someone who expected a routine confirmation. The human on Gath, 9, Fenwick said carefully. She's not dead. Give it time, Helene said. She has built a shelter. She has a water filtration system. She is cooking food. She has mapped the movement patterns of the apex predator in her zone, and it appears to be avoiding direct confrontation with her. Silence. That is not possible, Helene said. I am looking at it right now, Commander. More silence. Then Helene said, increase surveillance to full spectrum. I want thermal, atmospheric, biological. Every sensor we have on that grid. And do not file any report until I say so. Understood. Fenwick ended the call and turned back to his screen. As he watched, the human finished her meal, banked the fire for the night, and disappeared into her shelter. The next morning, a new Dravani surveillance satellite moved into low orbit over her position. Its sensors were military-grade and could count the hairs on her arms from space. The human stepped out of her shelter at dawn, looked up at the sky, spotted the new satellite immediately, and waved at it. Then she went about her day. The video was only 43 seconds long. It broke the galactic network for 6 hours that IT showed a human woman standing on a ridge of black volcanic rock. Behind her, the sky burned in shades of deep orange and violent purple as the sun of Gath. 9 sank behind a smoking mountain range. Wind whipped her hair across her face. She was sunburned and lean and smiling like someone on vacation. Day 62 on Gath, 9, she said into the cracked datapad she held at arm's length. Found a new trail today past the sulfur pools. Took me up to what I am calling the Quiet Ridge, because it is the only place on this planet where nothing is actively trying to eat me. The view is incredible. 9 out of 10. Losing 1 point, because something screamed at me from the valley on the way up, and I still do not know what it was. Anyway, sunset is gorgeous tonight. Wish you could see it. She turned the datapad to show the view. Molten rivers of lava glowed in thin lines across the distant valley floor. Bioluminescent spores drifted through the air like slow blue sparks. The jungle below was a carpet of dark red, shifting and rustling in the wind. It was terrifying and beautiful in equal measure. Nora turned the datapad back to herself. Tomorrow I'm going to try the cave system near the river. Saw some light coming from inside last week. Could be bioluminescent fungi. Could be something that wants to eat my face. Either way, should be interesting. Good night, whoever is watching the satellites. She winked. The video ended. Nora had discovered 2 weeks earlier that her damaged datapad could still ping the Galactic Communication Network. The signal was weak and unreliable, bouncing off the Dravani surveillance satellites in low orbit above her camp. She could not make calls or receive real-time messages, but she could upload short video files during brief windows when the satellite alignment was right. She had not planned to become famous. She had started recording the logs for herself, a habit from her cargo pilot days when she kept audio journals during long hauls. But the signal did not just go to her personal storage. It leaked. It went out onto the open network, fragmented and raw, and a Palani communications technician named Rena found it while scanning for signal anomalies during a routine shift. Rena watched the first video 3 times. Then she shared it with a colleague. That colleague shared it with a friend. Within 48 hours, every major species network in the galaxy had a copy. The reaction was immediate and enormous. No one had ever seen anything like it. Here was a being alone on a planet that the entire galaxy classified as a guaranteed death zone, and she was treating it like a camping trip. She rated sunsets. She named landmarks. She talked about the apex predator that circled her camp like it was a neighborhood dog she had learned to live with. She called it Grumbles. The Pelani were fascinated. The Gorvani were thrilled. Even the reclusive Tassini, who rarely engaged with galactic media, began sharing her videos among their deep ocean colonies with notes of admiration. But on Ordon, the reaction was very different. Commander Helene received 17 urgent messages in one morning. High Arbiter Solon summoned her to a private chamber and spoke in a voice that was dangerously quiet. "Explain to me," he said, "how a sentenced exile is broadcasting entertainment content from a planet she was supposed to die on." Helene did not have a good answer. She explained the signal leak, the satellite bounce, the Pelani technician who had found it. She explained that shutting down the signal would require repositioning the surveillance satellites, which would create a gap in their monitoring coverage. She explained that the videos were already being mirrored across dozens of independent networks, and that suppressing them now would only draw more attention. Solon listened to all of this with the stillness of a predator waiting to strike. "Shut it down," he said. They tried. The Dravani Intelligence Service issued takedown orders to 14 network providers. 9 complied immediately. The other 5 refused, citing open communication treaties. It did not matter. By then, the videos had been copied, repackaged, translated into 47 languages, and distributed through channels that the Dravani had no authority over. Nora kept recording. She did not know about any of this. She did not know that her casual sunset review had been viewed by over 2 billion beings in its first week. She did not know that fan communities had formed around her content, or that a Gorvani artist had painted a massive mural of her standing on the volcanic ridge with Grumbles in the background. She did not know that academic institutions were using her videos to study human adaptability, or that 3 separate documentary crews had filed requests to travel to the Gath system. She just kept living. She explored the bioluminescent caves and found exactly what she had hoped for: vast underground chambers covered in glowing fungal colonies that pulsed with soft blue and green light. She mapped them carefully and spent 2 nights sleeping inside when a storm above made the surface too dangerous. She recorded all. Day 71, she said in one video, sitting inside the glowing cave with light playing across her face. "Found what I'm calling the Blue Room. It is warm, dry, and nothing in here has tried to kill me yet, which puts it ahead of most places I have stayed. The glow comes from some kind of fungus on the walls. It pulses. I think it reacts to sound. When I talk, it gets brighter. So either it likes my voice or is trying to figure out how to digest me. I'm choosing to believe the first one. 7 out of 10. Comfortable, but no pillows." Across the galaxy, billions watched and shared and laughed and wondered that on Ordon, Fenwick watched too, alone at his monitoring station in the late hours when no one else was in the office. He never shared the videos. He never commented on any forum. But he watched every single one, and each time the human woman smiled into the camera from a planet that was supposed to be her grave, he felt something shift inside him that he could not name. The shuttle came down ugly, punching through the storm layer at a bad angle and hitting the volcanic flats about 2 kilometers east of Nora's camp with enough force to crack its landing struts. She heard it from the quiet ridge, where she had been collecting samples of vine that she suspected might be edible after proper treatment. The sound was unmistakable. Metal screaming against rock. Engine wash flattening trees. Someone had come to Gath 9, and they had not come well. Nora grabbed her pack and moved. 4 months on this planet had made her fast and efficient in the jungle. She knew the trails, knew which ground was solid and which would crumble under weight, knew where the predators liked to rest during the hot midday hours. She reached the crash site in under 30 minutes. The shuttle was a private model. Expensive, but not military. Its hull was scorched from the rough entry, and one of its rear stabilizers had sheared off completely. The door was open. Beside it, sitting on the ground with his back against the hull, was an alien she had never seen in person before, that he was a Gorvani. Short, round-bodied, with thick gray skin and wide eyes that blinked in rapid succession behind the faceplate of a full environmental suit. He was breathing hard. The suit's atmospheric readout was flashing yellow warnings across his chest panel. He saw her and froze. "You are the human," he said. His voice came through the suit's external speaker, thin and shaking. "You are Nora, and you're sitting next to a broken shuttle on a death world with a suit that is giving you warnings," Nora said. She crouched beside him and looked at the readings. His suit was working, but struggling with the sulfur content in the air. The filters were not designed for long-term exposure to Gath 9's atmosphere. "How long do your power cells last?" 6 days, he said. "Maybe 7. Then we have 6 days. What is your name?" "Pulav." "Okay, Pulav. Can you walk?" He nodded. He was scared. She could see that clearly, but there was something else in his wide, blinking eyes. Excitement. This was not a man who had crashed here by accident. He had come on purpose. She helped him up and led him through the jungle toward her camp. He moved slowly, every step careful and tense. He flinched at every sound. When a flock of leathery-winged creatures burst from a tree overhead, he dropped to his knees and covered his head. Nora waited patiently, then helped him up again. "They are just startled," she said. "They eat insects. You are too big and too ugly for them." He laughed. It was a nervous, breathless laugh, but it was real. At tea camp, she sat him down near the fire pit and gave him water that she had filtered through her charcoal system. She explained the setup while she prepared food. The shelter, the perimeter trench, the trail markers, the movement patterns of Grumbles, who was currently somewhere on the Western Circuit and would not be back through this area until evening. "You track the predator?" Pulav asked. "He is predictable, territorial, but not aggressive unless you enter his core zone. I stay out of it. He stays out of mine. We have an understanding. You have an understanding with a Category X apex predator. He is not so bad once you learn his schedule." Pulav stared at her. Then he laughed again, and this time it was not nervous. It was genuine. Over the next 5 days, Nora showed him Gath 9, not the death planet the galaxy feared, but the world she had come to know. She took him to the sulfur pools where geothermal vents created natural hot springs ringed with yellow crystal formations that caught the light like frozen fire. She took him along the quiet ridge at sunset and watched his face as the sky turned colors that no artist in the galaxy could mix. She took him to the blue room in the cave system and let him stand in silence while the bioluminescent fungus pulsed around them like a living heartbeat. On the 4th day, she took him to the eastern overlook where the jungle dropped away into a vast canyon. Far below, a river of luminous green water cut through black stone. Creatures moved along its banks, massive and slow, things that Nora had not yet cataloged. The scale of it was staggering. Pulav stood at the edge and did not speak for a long time. "I have traveled to 47 worlds," he finally said. "I have paid enormous sums to see things that other beings only dream of. None of it compares to this." "Is something," Nora agreed. "You were sent here to die. That was the plan, and instead you made it into this." Nora looked out over the canyon. "I did not make it into anything. It was always this. They just never bothered to look." On the 6th day, Pulav's suit power cells began their final warning cycle. His shuttle had enough fuel for a return launch, but not enough for another day on the surface. Nora walked him back to the crash site and helped him seal the damaged stabilizer well enough for a rough ascent. Before he climbed in, he turned to her. "I'm going to tell everyone about this place. I figured you would. People are going to want to come here, Nora." She considered this. She had been alone for 4 months. She had built something here, something private, something that belonged only to her and this angry, beautiful planet. The idea of others coming felt strange. But she thought about Pulav's face in the blue room. She thought about the way his fear had slowly, over 6 days, turned into wonder. "If they come," she said, "tell them to bring better suits. And tell them not to pet Grumbles." Pulav laughed one last time, climbed into his shuttle, and launched into the orange sky. 2 days later, his 5-star review hit the galactic network. Within a week, Nora's cracked data pad began receiving messages from strangers across the galaxy, all asking the same thing. "How do I book a trip?" The emergency session of the Dravani High Council had been going for 4 hours, and nobody was winning. High Arbiter Solon sat at the head of the long obsidian table, his forearms folded tightly against his chest, his expression carved from the same stone as the walls around him. To his left sat Commander Helene, who had not slept in 2 days and was doing a poor job of hiding it. To his right sat a row of senior advisors, legal scholars, and intelligence officers, all of them talking over each other in sharp, clicking syllables that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. The problem was simple to describe and impossible to solve. 6 months ago, they had sentenced a human pilot to exile on a death world. She was supposed to die quietly. Instead, she had become the most famous being in the galaxy. 47 unauthorized landings in the last 2 months, Helene reported, reading from her datapad with the flat tone of someone delivering news she wished she could burn. Private shuttles, chartered vessels, and at least 3 that we believe were operated by organized tour companies based in Pelani space. Every single visitor has returned alive. Every single one has posted public reviews. The humans' broadcasts have now been viewed over 9 billion times across all networks. One of the advisors, a narrow-faced Dravani named Taurus, leaned forward. Then we shut down by force. Send a military detachment to the surface. Remove her. Relocate her to a secure facility. And tell the galaxy what, exactly, another advisor said. That we are so threatened by one human woman cooking roots on a rock that we sent warships. The Human Confederation has already issued a formal notice, Helene added. They have not called it a threat. They have called it a request for clarification regarding the treatment of their citizen. But 3 of their patrol cruisers have moved to within 2 systems of Gath space. The implication is clear. Solon had not spoken in over an hour. He listened. He watched. His eyes moved from face to face as the arguments circled the table like predators around a fire. We could pardon her, a young voice said from the far end of the table. Everyone turned. Fenwick sat in the lowest ranking seat, the one nearest the door, where junior analysts were placed when they were required to attend but not expected to speak. He had been invited because he was the primary monitoring officer for the Gath 9 Exile case. He had not expected to open his mouth. Explain, Solon said. Fenwick swallowed. We issue a formal pardon. Frame it as a completion of sentence rather than an admission of error. State that the exile was always intended as a fixed-term rehabilitation program and that the human has demonstrated sufficient rehabilitation to warrant release. We bring her back. She goes home. The story ends. The room was quiet for 3 seconds. That is transparently dishonest, Solon said. Everyone in the galaxy watched the sentencing. It was permanent exile. There was no rehabilitation clause. If we change the terms now, we confirm that the sentence was unjust and that we lack the authority to enforce our own rulings. Fenwick lowered his eyes. Yes, High Arbiter. The arguments resumed. Options were raised and discarded. Block all traffic to the Gath system. Declare the planet a military exclusion zone. Negotiate with the Human Confederation for a quiet extraction. Each option carried costs that the Dravani were not prepared to pay. The human had become untouchable, not through strength or threats, but through the simple, ridiculous fact that billions of beings liked watching her videos that in the end, Helene proposed the only option that had not yet been tried. We contact her directly, offer to lift the exile. No conditions, no framing. A clean offer. She leaves the planet, returns to human space, and we move on. Solon stared at her for a long time. Then he nodded once. The message was sent through the same satellite network that Nora had been using to broadcast her logs. It was formal. It was carefully worded. It offered her full release from exile, transport to any system of her choosing, and the expungement of her criminal record from all Dravani databases. On Gath 9, Nora received it while sitting at the edge of the Howling Pass, watching the wind tear across the canyon below with enough force to bend the massive red trees on the far side nearly horizontal. She read it twice. Then she set the datapad down and sat with it for a long time. She thought about home. She thought about cargo runs and station food, and the hum of a ship engine during long, quiet hauls between systems. She thought about how the sky looked from the cockpit of a freighter cold and black and full of distant lights. Then she looked at the canyon. She looked at the jungle stretching to the horizon in every direction. She looked at the volcanic ridge where the sunset would come in a few hours, painting the sky in colors that no other world in the galaxy could produce. She thought about the Blue Room. She thought about Grumbles making his slow rounds through the Western Circuit. She thought about the dozens of messages sitting in her datapad from beings she had never met, asking if they could come here and see what she had seen. She picked up the datapad and recorded a new video. "Got an interesting message today," she said into the camera, her voice calm and warm. "The Dravani have offered to let me leave. Full pardon. Free ride home." She paused and looked out over the pass. The wind pulled at her hair. "I thought about it, and I appreciate the offer. I really do. But I am not leaving." She smiled. "This is my home now. And honestly, I have got a business to run. So if you're out there and you have been thinking about it, here it is. I am officially open for bookings. The name is Death World Getaways. Bring a good suit, comfortable boots, and an open mind. I will take care of the rest." She winked at the camera and ended the recording. Within an hour, it was everywhere. Within a day, Death World Getaways had a waiting list. On Oradon, Solon watched the video in his private chamber, alone. He did not speak for a very long time. 1 year to the day after a metal pod had crashed into the volcanic soil of Gath. 9. Nora stood at the edge of the Howling Pass at dawn and watched the sky turn from black to deep red to blazing orange. Behind her, 7 aliens stood in a loose group, each one wearing environmental suits rated for the planet's atmosphere, each one carrying a small pack that Nora had personally inspected before the hike began. There were 3 Palini, their 4 small eyes blinking rapidly behind curved faceplates. 2 Gorvani, one of whom kept whispering into a recording device strapped to his wrist. A tall Rassani female who had not spoken since landing, but whose wide golden eyes had not stopped moving, taking in everything. And 1 Tassini, a deep ocean species who rarely left their home world and who had traveled 6 systems to be here, sealed inside a pressure suit filled with salt water that hummed faintly with every step. Nora turned to face them. The wind was strong this morning, pulling at her jacket and whipping dust across the rocky ground. Below the pass, the canyon stretched into distant haze, its walls streaked with mineral deposits in shades of copper and black. Somewhere far below, the luminous green river carved its ancient path through stone. "Welcome to the Howling Pass," she said. "Name for the wind, which never stops here. We're going to walk the rim trail for about 2 kilometers. Stay on the marked path. Do not step on anything that looks soft because it probably is not ground. And if you hear something growl from the canyon, do not worry. That is just the rock settling." She paused and glanced at the Tassini. "You doing okay in there?" A series of rapid clicks came through the suit's translator, followed by a synthesized voice. "I'm experiencing a profound sense of terror and fascination simultaneously." Nora smiled. "That means you're doing it right." A lot had changed in 12 months. The camp that had started as a pile of volcanic rocks and lashed timber was now a proper base. Not fancy, not polished, but functional. Nora had built shelters designed for 6 different atmospheric types, each one constructed from local materials reinforced with salvage components from the growing pile of abandoned shuttle parts that visitors kept leaving behind. There were marked trails rated by danger level, from the relatively tame sulfur pools walk to the full-day ridge crossing that she only offered to species with sufficient gravity tolerance and a signed waiver. She was not alone anymore. A retired geologist named Howard had arrived 3 months ago on a research permit that he had technically forged. He had intended to stay for 2 weeks. He was still here, happily cataloging the mineral composition of every rock formation within a 10-kilometer radius and maintaining the trail markers with an obsessive precision that Nora found deeply comforting. A young marine biologist named Suki had come a month after him, drawn by the bioluminescent cave systems. She had mapped the entire underground network and discovered 17 new species of fungus, 4 of which produced compounds that early analysis suggested might have pharmaceutical applications. And then there was Dullo, the nervous Palini translator who had stood beside her in the Dravani courtroom and whispered apologies into her ear. He had quit his job 6 months after his sentencing. He had booked passage on a freight hauler, landed on Gath 9 in a suit 2 sizes too big, and walked into her camp carrying nothing but a data pad and a determination that Nora had not expected from him. I could not stop watching her videos, he had told her that first night, sitting by the fire with his 4 eyes wide and earnest. I was your advocate. I was supposed to protect you. I failed. I want to help now. He handled the booking system. He managed communications. He translated for visitors who did not speak common. He was terrible in the jungle, frightened of every sound, and he burned everything he tried to cook. Nora would not trade him for anyone. The business had a name now. Death World Getaways. It had a waiting list that stretched months into the future. It had reviews on 14 galactic platforms, averaging 4.8 out of 5 stars. The most common complaint was that the food was strange. The most common praise was that the human guide made you feel safe on a planet that should have killed you. Grumbles was still here too. The massive 6-legged predator had become an unlikely fixture of the operation. Nora had mapped his circuits so precisely over the past year that she could predict his location within 100 meters at any given hour. She had included a Grumbles sighting as a scheduled event on the premium tour package. Visitors could watch from a safe overlook as the creature made his evening patrol through the western jungle, his huge dark shape moving between the red trees with a grace that seemed impossible for something so large. He never approached the camp anymore. He and Nora had reached an understanding that neither of them could explain, but both of them honored. The Dravani Empire had, after months of internal debate and external pressure, quietly begun collecting what they called a planetary usage tax on all commercial activity on Gath 9. It was a small percentage. It was also an official acknowledgement that the activity was legitimate. High Arbiter Solon had never publicly commented on any of it. Commander Helene, according to a rumor that Fenwick had quietly passed along through an anonymous channel, had subscribed to Nora's video feed under a false name. Fenwick himself had submitted a formal visitor application 3 weeks ago. It was still pending. The Galactic Cartographic Authority had reclassified Gath 9 from Category X uninhabitable to Category H restricted tourism zone. The H stood for human managed. It was the first designation of its kind in galactic history. Nora led the group along the rim trail. The Palani chattered excitedly among themselves. The Gorvani recorded everything. The Rasani walked in silence, her golden eyes reflecting the vast landscape with an expression that might have been reverence. The Tassani clicked and hummed inside his pressure suit, and when they reached the overlook point where the canyon opened into its widest span, he stood motionless for nearly 5 minutes before his translator produced a single word. Beautiful. Nora stood beside him and looked out at the world that had been her prison, her challenge, her project, and finally her home. The sky was streaked with color. The jungle breathed below them. Somewhere in the distance, Grumbles roared, and the sound rolled across the canyon like slow thunder. She turned to the group. 7 aliens, 7 different worlds, 7 different bodies and atmospheres and ways of seeing. All of them nervous. All of them alive with something that went beyond fear. "Welcome to Gath 9, she said. "Watch your step, stay on the trail, and try not to pet anything that growls." She smiled. "You're going to love it here." The galaxy had sent her to die. She had sent back postcards. And now, 1 year later, the galaxy was lining up to visit.